So here it is. This is the Eversolo DMP-A6, and it's been getting tons and tons of attention from press, YouTube, and I've been getting tons and tons of requests from you guys to cover it. And some of you guys may be, sick of hearing about the Eversolo DMP-A6 because it's so widely covered. However, I've been living with it, so I'm here to tell you all the ins and outs, all the cons and pros that I've personally found on this device. So the question is this really the best streamer you can get in 2023 under $1,000? Or is there something better? So before agreeing to review the Eversolo DMP-A6, I decided to go to the Eversolo event held at Babelo Radio. Babelo Radio is one of the biggest stores in Canada, and it's located in Toronto downtown area, which is fairly close to where I live. So I decided to attend, and I was also curious to talk to some of the Eversolo reps and the salespeople on the floor to talk about what is exactly the reason that this unit is selling like hotcakes. And the first reason that came up was obviously the price. The price is very attractive at $860, so well under $1,000 for a streamer, DAC, and a preamp combo, which is a lot of functionality for $860. But a very close second reason was the screen. The LCD touch screen that is 6 inches, beautiful screen, and having first-hand experience with it, I mean, it's a beautiful screen. Like the moment I looked at the screen, I was like, oh, this is nice. And we like screens. I mean, just this year in 2023, 1.34 billion units of cell phones were sold. So if that's not a good indication of, us humans liking screens, then I don't know what is. But obviously you need a screen with cell phones. Maybe older people will disagree. But with streamers, you don't need a screen to allow the functionalities a streamer does. But it certainly does make it more attractive and certainly more intuitive in terms of how you can use the unit. I mean, we are adjusted to how we use our cell phones, right? So why change it? And the Eversolo DMP-A6 screen is very much like the UI system in our phones. So if you're familiar with using a phone, then you will be familiar with the Eversolo DMP-A6 and it'll be very intuitive right off the bat. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons the Eversolo DMP-A6 is selling like hotcakes, but also having high satisfaction rate with the people that have bought it, the customers. Because not only is it a touchscreen, which again isn't the first time that we've seen a touchscreen on a streamer, but the fact that this is based on the Android 11 and it's very intuitive and based on a cell phone kind of UI. So that kind of answered my burning question of why is this selling like hotcakes? Is it just a marketing ploy? Is it because it's being pushed heavily in just marketing? Well, not exactly, like I just mentioned. Even if you have heavy marketing, if the product isn't good, it's not gonna have satisfaction rate and it's just not gonna sell. But the second burning question I had as an audiophile was, how about the master edition they have? For about $400 more, you get the master edition with pretty substantial upgrades, at least on paper. So how does that transfer to the real world? So obviously, to answer my burning question, I have the original standard DMP-A6, as you know it, and the Master Edition DMP-A6 in here. So I've used both of these units and tested it side by side and compared it to answer the burning question, is it worth to upgrade to the Master Edition, or is the standard DMP-A6 just as good? So we will definitely be addressing that in this video. But also, we're gonna talk about the functionality of the DMP-A6, as well as how you can use it in 3 different ways in this video. So in terms of functions and features, it's exactly the same as is in the standard version as well as the master edition. So when I talk about functions and features and stuff like that, then just consider them exactly the same. It really comes down to the sound differences that we'll talk about in the later part of this video. That's where the master edition and the standard version is a little bit different. But it also comes with a really nice app and the screen in the front. And we're definitely going to talk about like all the wonderful things you can do on this unit with those things. However, first thing is first, right? Let's talk about how we can connect this unit to our system because there's 3 different ways to do it. Again, remember, this is a streamer, DAC, and a preamplifier. And while many units out there that's integrated like this doesn't allow you the flexibility to, connect it in different ways, this unit actually allows you the flexibility to use it in different ways in your system because it has a lot of inputs and outputs. So the first way to use the DMP-A6 is to just use it as a streamer. So let's say that you have an external DAC that you already like, or a integrated amplifier with a DAC built in that you already like, and would like to use those instead of the internal DAC on the DMP-A6. You can do that by using the digital outputs on this unit. So you have coax, optical, and USB audio at the bottom. The top USB port is something else, so it's just the bottom port. We'll talk about the top one in a bit here. But whenever possible, I do choose the USB audio over coax or optical because USB audio offers the highest resolution playback possible. So ultimately, you would be connecting the digital outputs to the digital inputs of your integrated amplifier or external DAC to do this. Now, when you're using it as just a streamer, you are kind of crushing the value proposition because you are not using the DAC and the preamp in this. However, I do think that it's not that much of a big deal because having digital outputs is a great thing. Because let's say the DAC inside the unit gets outdated, well, you can upgrade it to any DAC in the world you want by using the digital outputs. So this makes this unit a lot more future-proof against DACs, right? So that's wonderful. I love that. Now, the second way to use this unit is to use this unit as a streamer / DAC, right? Now, to do that, you would use the analog outputs and connect it to your integrated amplifier with a preamp built in or a separate preamplifier. And to do this correctly, you would use either the RCA or the XLR. Personally, I used XLR. Analog output to the analog input of your integrated amplifier or preamplifier. You also have to use the app or the front screen to allow the volume to be a fixed output. Because remember, there's volume control happening either in your integrated amplifier or you're using a separate preamplifier. Those are the two case scenarios where you would use this as just a streamer and DAC, okay? So you have to have fixed output because you don't want to control volume 2 times, just once. So these will have to be set to fixed output. Now, the third way and how I see a lot of people using this unit is to use all 3 functionality: streamer, DAC, and preamplifier. Now, this, you basically very simply use the same analog outputs, but you would be using a solo amplifier with no preamplifier built in. So instead of connecting it to a preamplifier or integrated amplifier with preamp built in like before, you will be connecting this to a standalone amplifier like my AGD Audion monoblocks, for example. And you can control the volume with the front dial. However, now you have to go to the app or the front screen to make sure that you don't have it on fixed output, but in variable output. And this is very important because if you have it on fixed output, you're sending a full signal to a standalone amplifier and you may damage your speakers. So it's very important for you to have it as a variable output, and that way you're now using this unit as a preamplifier as well. Now, you may also realize that it also has digital inputs. It has coax, it has optical, and USB-C. You can use these to connect it to your TV, like optical will be the most popular in that case. CD player or phone or stuff like that. So it can accept digital signals input as well. Now, talking about this USB port at the top, this is for storage. So if you have a USB stick or a hard drive, for example, and with music stored in it, then you can connect it to this to play and connect it to the DMP-A6. So that's another option for you there in terms of hard drive. Now, another thing is that this also accepts SSD up to 4 terabytes. So it does not include it, but you can buy a SSD, load all your music. I mean, 4 terabyte is like more than enough. That's a lot of music. And you can connect it to the bottom of this unit here. So it offers plenty of hard drive space for that, which is awesome. Now, this HDMI port, I got really excited when I first saw it because I thought this was eARC or I2S, but it's none of those things. So it's not eARC to connect it to your home theater or your TV. It's not a I2S, so it's not for connecting it to your DAC. This is actually for multi-channel and maybe SACD and stuff like that. So very niche kind of usage. And I don't think a lot of people be using this. I may be wrong. I didn't use it. And I wish that they would at least include eARC or I2S in the future. And that would be a really, really, banger right there. But anyways, it does have a gigabit LAN Ethernet port, which is awesome. And that's kind of what I used mostly. But it also has two Wi-Fi antennas here for Wi-Fi connectivity, right? So it has two antennas to pick up better signals. And it has one antenna dedicated to Bluetooth. Now, the Wi-Fi on this is kind of like a lot of streamers I have seen. It doesn't work the best. It kind of has dropouts, and it's definitely not my house because I don't have Wi-Fi hotspots. And stuff like my laundry machine that uses Wi-Fi as well these days in the basement works fine. So it's definitely not my house, and it's definitely not my internet connection. I have the highest internet possible in Canada, so that would be very weird if that was the case. But like many streamers I have seen, the Wi-Fi capability is just okay. It's not the most reliable. I would stick with the Ethernet port for the most cases, if possible. Now, the DMP-A6 UI system, the screen, and the app is really amazing value for under $1,000. It does a lot of things that a lot of other streamers don't do. For example, my Inus Zen Mini Mark III or the Volumio doesn't do a lot of the things that I'm about to talk about. But it's not a perfect unit either. The Eversolo DMP-A6 does have some flaws and does have some things that I wish it did that it doesn't quite do yet. So I'm gonna lay those things out right now. The first thing is, there's a lot of softwares, so I'll give them that. I mean, there's a lot of software support. So if you play Tidal, Spotify, Amazon Music, or whatever software you may be using, it supports that. And if it doesn't now, there's a good chance that it's going to in the future as updates come out. So there was like 2 updates just when I had this unit in the time span of me having this unit, and new things were being added each time. So that's good to see. On the other hand, you don't have access to the App Store despite this being based on the Android 11 device. So this means that you can't download third-party apps like you would on your phone or at your own leisure. So you will have to wait until Eversolo updates the unit physically to allow you access to these softwares. And as much as I love the screen in the front, it is a wide screen. So it's kind of hard to use, it's harder to use a wide screen because we're accustomed to using a phone. But quickly, this problem goes away with the app included with the unit. And I personally found that using the 192 kilohertz sampling rate on the unit, with older recordings particularly, and like poor recorded music, it kind of opens up the sound stage, make things more spacious, smoother. So I really enjoyed that, and I really think that you should try it if you have any poor recordings that you wanted to play. It certainly does help with the whole entire musical performance and enjoyment. Also, MQA is a huge debate. Some people like it, some people don't. And here it gives you the option to turn off MQA or set the unit to just render or render and decode. As well, talking about the flexibility, it allows you to change the different steps in volume. So I had it to 0.5 dB, but it allows you to have anywhere from 0.5 dB to 3 dB of increment when you turn the volume knob up or down. Now, at the time of this review, it doesn't have a remote control that comes with the unit, but they do sell a remote separately on their website. But the phone, if you use the app, allows you volume control as well as every setting that you would possibly need. So I don't really see a point for a remote, a traditional remote, because in this case, your phone is the remote. Now, in regards to the volume, I wish that this unit had gain control. So I wish it had like low gain, medium, or high gain settings so that you can match gain with different amplifiers. Because I found that with some amplifiers, in rare cases, I would be way past 12 o'clock and the volume wouldn't be, as loud as I wanted it to be. So that has to do with the gain setting of the DMP-A6. So I wish that it would allow more flexibility to allow for better matching with different amplifiers when using as a streamer, DAC, and preamp combination. Now, another thing is that if you've seen SMSL or topping units, you'll be familiar with this, the filter settings. And I honestly, the differences are so small. And by the time you go to the unit and change the filter, I mean, it's very hard to discern the differences. However, you get that filter setting in the app. So this means that you can change it on the go and readily hear the differences. Now, I heard very minute differences even in that scenario. I spent about 2 hours just A/Bing each filter and practically came out with the conclusion that the first filter, the fast linear, is the best one. So that's the filter I stuck with. The rest was kind of either made it worse, like the high frequency was less refined, or tried to make it a little bit more warmer or intimate sounding. But ultimately, I found that the fast linear was much more open sounding, much more air. So the other filters either took air away or made the high frequency unrefined, or something janky was going on in the high frequency. So it's not a huge difference, but I would definitely stick with the first filter option. And that kind of brings me to another point. I wish that instead of these filters that's kind of hard to hear the differences and if it's doing anything, I wish it had EQ instead. This would allow a lot more flexibility for the end user and myself to kind of tweak the sound or kind of adjust it to the room that I am in or the speakers that I'm playing with. So I wish that it had EQ instead of these filters. Now, honestly, there are so many different settings on the unit itself. Like you can adjust the screen brightness, you can even adjust the brightness of the knob. There's a lot of flexibility and customization with this unit that we just won't be going over every single one. But one thing that I really like is the VU meter. It has a fake VU meter, and people will have mixed feelings about this, about the fake VU meter, but it is certainly nice to see the meters dancing around when you're rocking out to some tunes. So I really like this unit. I mean, it offers a lot of features. Can it be better? Yes, it can. But I mean, for under $1,000, I think it's doing a lot already. But I definitely see it getting better as user and reviews kind of give more feedback to Eversolo. Because clearly, they're very capable of implementing these things. As I've seen in the update, things keep rolling out, and it seems like it's based on feedback. For example, I heard from a Patreon that the Amazon Music was not available, and that was a deal breaker for him. But now, if you look at the app, then you can see that the Amazon Music is available now after the update. So it's really nice to see a company taking customer feedback seriously and implementing them right away and incorporating it to their update. I get excited when there's an Eversolo update because I'm expected to see something new. So the difference between the DMP-A6 Standard Edition and the Master Edition is that they sound slightly different. So the DMP-A6 Master Edition is a little bit more meatier in the mid-range. So it has a little bit more fuller mid-range sound. And the top frequency, the high frequency is more refined. It's more smooth sounding, yet it does have all the details that the DMP-A6 is known for. Overall sound of both units lean towards a little bit on the brighter of neutral. And I know the word bright is associated with all the negativity. However, in this case, it's not harsh, it's not piercing, it's not edged out. It is a quite refined high frequency, especially on the Master Edition. Now, if you have a really high-end system and you just want something that's intuitive, that works well, that's a streamer, that has all these capabilities built in, but want something that is a little bit more refined on the top end and has a little bit more meat and body to the sound in the mid-range, then the Master Edition makes a lot of sense for extra $400. However, with that being said, the original standard version of the DMP-A6 isn't bad at all in terms of sound, and it doesn't deviate far away from the Master Edition at all. Most importantly, both units have really good bass capability, and it has really good nuance, it has good texture, it has great punch and extension. I have really no complaints with the bass performance, but when it comes to mid-range and high frequency, the original standard edition does have a little bit more leaner, and I wish that it was a little bit more fuller sounding, as well as the high frequency being a little bit edgy at times with certain recordings. This is where the Master Edition makes a lot of sense, and that's why I like it more, because even though it's a slight difference, when you have a high-end system, it does matter and it does contribute to the overall sound that makes it more enjoyable to listen to. But if you have a budget system and you just want something that sounds nice, even though the DMP-A6 Standard Edition does have a little bit more leaner presentation in the mid-range and a little bit more less refined on the top frequency, it's not by a huge amount. And certainly if you want to save $400, I think the DMP-A6 Standard Edition is perfectly fine. Now, what makes these sound differences? Well, the two main differences between the DMP-A6 Standard version and the Master Edition is that the clock and the op amp is different. So those two things have been upgraded on the Master Edition. And of course, the aesthetic on the front panel with the gold lettering is on the Master Edition, while you get the silver lettering on the Standard Edition. One thing that I really appreciate about the Eversolo units, both the Standard and the Master Edition, is the sound staging. The sound staging, the airiness, the spacious presentation on both units is quite exceptional. And not just because it's under $1,000, but even in a high-end configuration, like the Rosso Fiorentino speakers, with the Eversolo, with the AGD amplifier, for example, it's really nice. I mean, the high frequency, the airy presentation is really beneficial to a system like this. And I think I see a lot of people pairing the Eversolo to kind of balance out the warm nature of a sound system. And what do I mean by that? Well, I certainly don't see myself personally pairing this up with like a Focal speaker or Magical speaker or any speaker that I personally find to have a lot of top frequency energy, because it's gonna make it more bright and more brittle to my ears. However, if I have a warm sounding speaker like the Rosso Fiorentino or the Audio Craftsman Victoria loudspeakers, Picard S400 Mark II, something that is on the warmer side of neutral slightly, well, that's kind of where the DMP-A6 kind of kicks in. Now, you may remember my video about the Rosso Fiorentino or the Audio Craftsman or even the Hago H600, right? Stuff that I found that the highs were not really airy. That's not what their sound is about. These are warm sounding units, right? Either as speakers or amplifiers, it's warm sounding. And let's say you have a system like that and you really enjoy it, but you want a little bit more airy presentation, a little bit more spaciousness, right? You want to kind of open it up a little bit. Then something like the DMP-A6 makes a lot of sense. It balances out the system quite well while adding air, and the nice thing is that it doesn't overdo it, right? Sometimes it overdoes things, like when you add a component that you think it's gonna add air, but then instead it makes the system more brighter than you have hoped for. At least in my system, I have not found that. I found that it adds air and nice balance to the rest of the system and keeps the integrity of that warm sound that I like. So I really like that. It balances the system out, adds more air without taking too much of the warmth away. And that to me is a pretty darn good value right there in terms of sound. And I can see exactly how I would use this unit in terms of matching in my system. But ultimately, the value here is in the features, the screen, and everything combined. This is a really good value streamer in my opinion. It actually kind of exceeded my expectations. I mean, I had pretty high expectation going into this review because of all the great reviews out there, but it kind of exceeded my expectations because not only does it sound more than decent, right? I hope that it sounded decent, but this is more than decent in my opinion for under $1,000. Plus the features and the UI system, everything is just really well tied in and really well thought out. So I think it's a really good value. And I know that some of you may want, comparison with streamers, but the hardship with that is that all these streamers have different functionalities and they don't really overlap much. So you have to really look at the features when it comes to streamers. That's the first thing. Does it meet your needs? And then we can talk about sound quality and all that kind of stuff. So far, I don't really have a streamer in here other than the Eversolo that has a screen right now. I know Fio and HiFi Rose have screens, so it's gonna really depend on your budget as well as do you want a screen, the features, and do you like the sound description that you're hearing from these reviews and myself. But nevertheless, if you have a streamer that you want me to compare to the Eversolo, then comment down below in the comments and I'll check it out and see if I can make a comparison video. But other than that, that's it for this video. I hope this video was helpful. I hope that it was enjoyable and entertaining. And if it was, please click that like button and make sure to subscribe for more audio videos just like this. And I'll see you guys on my next journey. Until next time.